turnout, and we're very, very lucky to have as our guest today Kevin. Where's Kevin? Kevin Johnson, and hopefully Kevin's got his phone or his Zoom on non-mute.
That's correct.
By way of starting, Coffee Buddies is a get-together show. We call it a show because we're here to entertain, to engage and inform, and we're on air a couple of times a week. Our goal is to be no longer than 45 minutes to an hour if Graham stretches me. The length of time for a coffee so we can all keep our attention rigorous. And we've got a fantastic set of people today. So I'll kick off by welcoming Kevin Johnson, who I've known for some time, who's a big player in the investment scene. And I think I first met him about 2002, something like that. I don't know whether you're at Cambridge Antibody there, Kev. But what I'm going to do is just ask Kev to introduce himself. We'll find out a little bit about who Kev is. And as a grandee in the investment world, we're all interested in what's going on. So I'll start asking a few questions. But Kev, welcome. It's a great pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks a lot, Tony. I'm happy to be here. Although the grandee thing is slightly uncomfortable.
Well, I think you deserve it, my friend. So Kev, just to start off, you're an investor. You've been investing now for, I don't know, 15 years or so. So just tell us about who you are. Well, who's Kevin Johnson and what have you done?
Okay, so I'm Kevin Johnson. I'm a partner at a venture capital firm called Medici. We were a spin out of Index Ventures a few years ago, but we're now a freestanding independent venture capital entity. A large number of people have a similar profile to myself, where we've come from the industry. So we've started out, it's a poacher gamekeeper thing, where we've started out in biotech or in pharma, and now we work on the investment side. We're currently investing a 400 million euro fund, one of many that have cashed up recently, say in the last 9 months. So we're all in a pretty good place with regards to being able to carry on business.
And what's the Medici, you yourself as an individual, you were previously a CEO, was it? I can't remember the company, Pan something, some time ago.
Oh yeah, so my background is in antibodies, and I was with Cambridge Antibody Technology from the start until about 2003. And then I went on to, I was just hanging out with venture capitalists when I left. At the time that was just Geneva. We've got offices in London and Geneva, and I work in the London office normally. But actually, Pangenetics was an investment experiment in something that's now turned out to be the house style, which you call asset-centric investing. So they'd rather than invest in a full build out with a luxury frontage and labs and whatever, large numbers of people. We operate in a largely virtual manner, with each company containing one or a couple of closely related assets. So effectively, it's a stripped down biotech company with the majority of the. So normally there's a couple of people in them. And pretty much everything is contracted out. So that's the house style now. And in fact, a large part of our story to our investors, our LPs, is investing with that style. But I was CEO of Pangenetics, not by design. That was basically just happened, which was the first experiment in running one of these asset-centric companies back in 2003, 2004.
And if you take something like Medici, what's its sweet spot? What's it like to invest in?
I'd say that even though our current fund is, we've gradually got to the place I really want to be, which is a hunting license for pretty much anything, anywhere. Although the earlier funds were more restricted than that, either geographically or in stage. I'd say that we still focus almost entirely on drugs and various stages of drugs. And I think that genetically, we're probably early stage specialists. So we tend to go from the concept to proof of concept in phase 1. So our sweet spot is that the amount of cash and time to take something from an idea or a compound through to testing it for the first time in man, preferably patients.
And what
That's it.
I mean, what Kev, you know, how do you make a decision to invest? I mean, what's yeah? See that nearly always there's that little smile, and I've seen that smile a long time, you know, from many people. But yeah. I mean, you know, if you lot sit around, do you use the runes or something to measure it, or a crystal ball, or what? How do you decide that this is hot?
Yeah, well, you know yourself. I mean, it's, you know, if you put yourself in any position, say, is this an opportunity I would pursue or not? You know, you put lots of stuff into that decision, all right? And it's a question of where the balance lies in that. I'd say that there are two broad things that need to be right. One is the target validation. You know, a lot of the stuff we're doing is unprecedented. You know, so somebody's found target X, Y, Z, and we want to try it in a given indication. How much proof do we have, or how much, you know, how much certainty do we have that we are actually pressing on the right node for doing that, which we'd regard as target validation? And there are multiple inputs from that, you know, so parallel pathways or genetics or all sorts of things can apply to the how validated is that target. Because until you've proven it, it's a religion, right? And it's a question of what's keeping us in the church.
Yeah.
To believe that's real before we actually find out whether it's real or not.
But if you take that's a sort of, if you take that's classical drug discovery, isn't it? I mean, it's going back to Jimmy Black almost, that you find your target and you do your dose response. So I suppose in a modern world, are there technological, you know, we hear a lot about AI, we hear a lot about in silico prediction, almost magic boxes that say, you know, you've got to hit this target, Tony, because it's the best one. So what's your thoughts on that?
Generally, if we hear the word AI, we immediately put in a bullshit account. All right. I honestly, we see all of this machine learning shit, and you know, the fact of the matter is that it's already been used for like the last 20 years in various iterations, and we're just getting better and faster at doing what we could do 20 years ago. It used to be called bioinformatics. Then it was pathways, you know, pharmaco, whatever. There are lots of different names for it, so it's effectively rebranding that area. And what we see is that for AI, if we want to go down that particular rabbit hole, is that they tend to be really good at speeding up the bits we're already quite quick at. You know, so this isn't about the battleground isn't drug discovery. Everybody, if you're a drug discoverer, you think the battleground's drug discovery. Frequently, it isn't. You know, if we have a decent looking target, we can find something that'll hit that target in the right way, and we'd rather have a really good target than as a starting point than a really good molecule as a starting point, because we can actually devise various discovery strategies to come up with something that works. But AI is normally in the context of speeding up drug design or drug discovery, when in reality, you know, you spend most of your time and most of your money in the clinic. So in fact, if you were logical about it, that's where you'd invest your time and effort, not into creating these things.
But that's a big issue. I mean, you know, as a guy who was ex-head of Roche's worldwide clinical, I know that it's all to do with cash. So the development is process and cash. Discovery is creativity and imagination. So, you know, I know Medici has large ticket sizes, but I mean, does that mean that we've got a lot of companies that are struggling because they can't get that ticket for development?
Well, I think it comes back down to this religion question, which was one of them, which was how much is there to believe that we are working in the right area, the right place. And then the other half is, will anybody care when we've done it? So that's the commercial side of things. Because effectively, we're just part of a food chain. And actually, if you hear things from VCs, because, you know, you've only really got two exit points for a VC-backed company. Either it's bought by a larger company or it goes public. Right? And you can argue whether the exit is, whether public an exit. It has been in the last few years, actually. So, but those are the two routes out. And for us, in both cases, actually, we need to know that there's a commercial, we can build a commercial rationale as well. So I'd say there's the scientific technical piece, which is what you would call the creative stuff, Tony. But then there's the commercial piece, which is, will anybody care? Will anybody pay for it? And how are they going to look for it? And that's a whole different game. Where particularly if you're aiming for the US, then it's the payers, and that is a very unusual system, and it's one that is that you need to know how to navigate. So what makes us invest or not invest? We've got to really believe the target, and actually human genetics is probably the biggest individual contributor to that. And then there's the commercial side of things, which is a combination of farmer input and payer input.
So another thing is, you know, fake news, in the words of the world. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, when I was at Roche, I'd wander around and I'd say, how's this project going? And everyone would say, well, you know, there's this problem, there's this problem, there's this problem. Whereas you wander around other ecosystems and you ask CEOs, how is it working, or how is it going? And it's wonderful. It's all wonderful. You know, everything's fantastic. Now, I've always asked this question as science moved on a long way since I was in the lab and struggling to do a guinea pig ileum, or is it that there is something about bravado that, and then my question to you is, does bravado cover up reality?
Well, I always think that certainly the larger or the more public facing a company, the more confidence you have to display that you don't necessarily feel. So it does tend to, we do tend to see that. I mean, and you know, we all do it. So it's no point, you can't point fingers. We all do it. You know, if we want to incite people to do something, we'll try and make whatever we're trying to make happen attractive. And so you can usually take a pessimistic or an optimistic view on anything. So you're going to take the optimistic view. With this is one of the reasons where we like these cut down companies, because there is no public facing element. There's not enough room for any public facing element. And the fortunes of the individuals who are in these things is so closely tied up with the actual content of the company, not what you would like it to be, not what you convey it to be, but what it actually is, that they're probably the most, they're more aggressive in how they view these things than we are. Because, you know, for them, it's a fairly binary and singular opportunity cost. And if they're going to waste time on something, then make sure it's, you know, it's something worthwhile. If it's not worthwhile, then just let it go, and we'll put them there.
As venture people, the other question, I mean, I've seen a trend as the years have gone on, from a time when the venture people knew nothing and they relied solely on the CEO, to a time that the venture people seem to know a lot more, and the CEO is like an executor, and sometimes quite a neutered executor. So my question to you, what's your thoughts on that?
I think it depends on the sort of company. That for our companies, the people we call CEOs of these companies, which can be one of two people in the company, they're more like CSOs. If you were to stratify them externally, and that's great because they need to have the domain expertise to be able to progress these projects. I like to think that we don't get in the way, but we do help. So generally, I think my job is to strap afterburners to the individual who has a project in question. So the people who these guys tend not to be great at fundraising. Fundraising is a skill in and of itself.
Yeah.
But it's much easier for us to do that on their behalf, to do that with them.
Yeah.
The difference between sitting on this side of the table from before when I was on the other side is that I'm now just calling my friends and say, are you interested in company X, Y, or Z? This looks really interesting. Do you want to get in on this deal? That's a much easier conversation to have than, an email or trying to fabricate a warm introduction to a particular VC somewhere.
It is interesting, Kev, because if you have the phenotype of a CSO as the top man, as if you like, domain instrument of the strategy and the corporate knowledge of the venture partners, it really is interesting in the evolution of a company, because many companies require a CEO as almost a startup ignition key to get the thing going. But what it's saying to me is, in a way, for your type of investment, it's hard then, and maybe that's why we're getting this stratification of investors like yourself, and then investors who go lower down the pecking order.
Yeah, I mean, I've often thought that it's a little unusual that we expect the people who began a company to be the same, to remain the same over the life of that company. I always think of it like a game of American football, where you have a team for the 30-yard line, you have a team for the 120-yard line, or whatever the hell it is, but it's a different one. And it really depends on the trajectory of the company. And if we think that the opportunity really needs to be a public company, it starts out as two men in a shed.
Yeah.
It then moves on to, well, actually, this needs to be a listed entity. We use the cost of capital, therefore we need to go public. It's got multiple programs that are going to come off this. There is no way we're doing this in a private company. Then that would pretty much guarantee a team change prior to that.
But for that to work, you've got to have the phenotype of humans who almost the CEO becomes a portfolio owner himself. In other words, he's had a portfolio of things that he's never found it nervous, because he's a good hunter-gatherer. In other words, he hunts the new one. And I know that if you're successful, sometimes they give you one, but it's also sometimes a bit dodgy because you feel at risk, Kev, you're frozen. Hello, did you get that, pal?
You had as well. I'm not quite sure I got that question. It's
it's just that you end up with people, you've got to have CEOs who can create their own portfolio and be not nervous to throw themselves on their own sword, really, because that's the way you have to do it,
Yep. And that's there are many of those in our portfolio now, men and women who will actually do that. If for whatever reason, because they've got a fairly large chunk of equity in this thing, then you know, their interests are aligned anyway, and that's probably the in
So,
the
yeah, so Kev, that's the sort of past. Now the present, we're sitting here. I am in sunny Welwyn Garden. Are you still in Cambridge?
yes.
Yeah, so you're in sunny Cambridge. I mean, the present, what's happening to your mind or the partners' minds in the COVID time?
So I think that there are obviously many impacts of COVID. In our existing portfolio, most of the companies that have been running clinical studies have had to put those on hold. The CROs are still operating to a large part, but at reduced capacity, so everything is slowing down. And there is a general sense, you know, in the units down. So there, having said that, ourselves, like multiple other groups, I've actually, this last couple of weeks have been a couple of the busiest weeks I've ever had, actually. And we're just doing everything over Zoom, which I'd never heard of a few weeks ago, but now I'm doing loads of it. And Graham's changing his backgrounds. Everybody's on the damn thing. So there is a degree of retrenchment, but actually, there's just one snippet I thought would be quite interesting, because I thought it was quite interesting when I heard it. So one of the things that I've done in the past, or that we get roped into, is that we go to our LPs, our investors, often hold annual general meetings or something where they invite GPs from their funds to contribute and to be part of their day. And the really interesting thing, and I've seen this a number of times now, is that when they show their returns in different years, you know, they call them vintages. And the interesting thing is that all of them, their most profitable vintages, the most profitable years, have been those years where there's been a downturn. So immediately after 2000, in the follow-up to 2008, and there's an expectation that this period will be the same. And whether that's because of, you know, that people tend to be a little bit more realistic with pricing of various things, I don't know. But that historically, their best returns have been in what's called difficult years. And you know, when you look, but in the life science world, we're not really an optional extra. You know, if you're in tech and you've got sales, then people are, you know, ramping back on various on expenditure, whereas this isn't really an area where expenditure is optional. So there's got to be some continuity. We're probably more insulated than other sectors.
And do you think, I mean, diagnostics has been in the doldrums for a while, and you know, most people, I remember Dominic Schmidt at Syncona telling me he's fed up with seeing people measuring another thing they're measuring in a point of care box. And I suppose the question is do you think there'll be a change in mindset about diagnostics, or is that
no?
You still think it's viewed as the dog end, the dog end?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. I've been looking for an investment model that will enable us to do diagnostics for years, and I've never seen one. It's just, you know, it's almost a guaranteed way of losing your shirt.
Yeah.
From what I can see, I'm happy to be taught otherwise, but I've not seen anything, because I think in terms of societal impact, that would be way bigger societal impact than bringing in a new drug, for example. But it's just that I think the investment model, I haven't seen one that consistently, not just the one-offs here and there, but consistently could form the basis of some sort of investment thesis. Yeah.
And Kev, for the future, where you know, post this strange time we're in, will we be back to normal? Will I be able to entice you to Swansea for one of those Swansea? You know, I'm
Well,
trying
if there's anything decent, then you can get more than a bloody pizza.
Well, I'm trying to get Wales up there. I'm up there with Wales. But what's going to be? Do you think we're going to just, the day it's going to open up, and I'm not going to put my suit on, but we're going to go out there and we're going to do our normal stuff, or what?
Yeah, I think so. I think largely so. Actually, I'm not seeing any reason why there is a structural change in the industry. We don't live in a vacuum, so there are all sorts of things that come along, but there's nothing structurally that alters people's need for new medicines or new treatments. I mean, people need to get older, but that's about it.
Is it going to affect? Will it affect some of those funds, like the longevity funds? There was a lot of money that's going into longevity. Will it affect rare diseases? Will we be? Will the mindset be that we've been talking about high price, small numbers, whereas now we need to think of low price, many people.
Not because of this. I think that was pre-existing. This whole thing that the orphan drugs, in sum total, orphan drugs are about 30 odd% of the budget, the overall drugs budget, even though the numbers are very small. The numbers of individuals are very small. I think this is something that's been around for a long time. I don't see this is not a COVID effect. This is more of a structural thing within our industry, and I think that is, I think the days of simply being able for farmers simply to be able to lift the prices every year in, year out, I think they're numbered. So one of my rules is follow the money. If you can find, even when you've got a situation where you've got like a cheap generic and it's a bit shitty, right? It just the people don't like using it, blah, 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 blah. And then somebody comes along and said, well, I've got an opportunity which goes after the same patient population but cleans up the profile hugely. The problem I have with that is that, and it's not just me, I mean, I'm reflecting this, is that does a prescribing physician treat 100 patients at, say, 80% of what it could be, or 5 at 100%, with an expensive new drug? So, within all of this, I think that pharmacoeconomics are going to play a big part, because we can't simply, we're getting older, we need more stuff, it's getting more expensive to develop that stuff. At some point, we're going to get squeezed hard.
Yeah, and if something comes across your desk which is antiviral or vaccine, will you look at it differently now, man?
No, I think it's too easy to just react to these things. I mean, why should I? Why should I look at it differently?
Yeah. No, I gotcha. So, I mean, it's 3:01 now. It's time we're going to open it up to the audience, and we've got a fantastic number of people on the line. So, Kev, that was brilliant, man, as always. And your reward will be in Swansea. If we look at the audience, I don't know, Graham, have we got anyone queuing up for a question?
Well, you can, by the way, put your hands up and put questions in, but why don't you just go for a new person in the room like Pierre Emmanuel, for example, to start. But if anybody else would like to put questions forward, please just raise your hand or put a comment in.
Pierre, have you got any questions, my friend? Can you go on to me off mute, please?
You spoke about COVID.
Pierre, just say who you are, please. Announce to the group.
Okay, Pierre-Emmanuel Gerard. I'm the CEO of Biomunex. I'm based in France, and we do bi- and multi-specific antibodies in the treatment of cancers, immuno-oncology. So my question is, you spoke about COVID crisis, but you haven't said what is your opinion regarding the valuation of biotech companies? What is the influence of on the valuation of biotech companies of the crisis? Of course, we have a healthcare crisis today, but tomorrow, most probably a very tough economic crisis. What do you think?
I think there's an expectation that valuations will get squeezed, and certainly the public market valuations have been squeezed, and there tends to be a trickle-down effect into the private companies, even though there's no independent pricing for those. So there is an expectation that that will be the case. We're expecting it for our portfolio companies that need to raise money. We think we're going to take a bit of a beating on the valuation. But the more important thing is that the companies get financed and are able to complete their mission. I think that tends to be it's, if you look for what is simply a reaction and what is the real underlying cause of that reaction, then in reality, the only thing that should be affecting valuations of particularly private companies should be that the farmers aren't making, and the farmers and the biotechs aren't making as big a sale. 2020 is not going to be a banner year for sales in pharma. I think that's just the writing is there on the wall. Fewer procedures, everything's getting pushed aside while we deal with COVID. So that's the only real hard piece of data. But then there's perception. So people's perception is that it's going to be tough. They'll act like it is tough, and they'll make it real that way. But I think the expectation is that the valuations are going to get squeezed.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions that people have come through to me. Samir wants to ask a question. Samir, do you want to unmute yourself? I'll unmute you so that you're unmuted.
Yeah, hi everyone. Hi Kevin, nice to meet you, and such a great talk, very insightful. I come with two backgrounds. So I'm a pharmacologist by training from Cambridge, done drug discovery at Sosei Heptares before. Target validation, absolutely agree with you, is the most important part of the puzzle, but also I work on drug pricing and work with HTAs and payers. My questions are, I've got two questions. One question is, what is your opinion about those investors, actually quite a lot in Cambridge, who are investing into things like Okra and Helix, which are AI-based drug discovery platforms? Do you think that they look at the speed and the business model aspects of these companies, in terms of acquiring patient data, for example? And the second question I have is around pricing. Do you think this is now going to be a turning point where payers are going to look at value-based pricing, for example, because you're looking at multiple indications and you're looking at comorbidity? So therefore, whatever goes in the background of patients as a part of their profile, it sort of directly impacts on those indications that we're going to invent on, right?
Yeah. So two questions. One of them is about more tech-based approaches. What we see. So our again, I just return to our exit points, and actually I'm a VC now, so exits are how we manage to raise another fund, and that's how you win. So on those, the problem is that most of the big biotechs and all of the farmers are developing their own proprietary systems anyway. It's just plug and play for them. It's difficult to see how those represent good investments unless they're really knocking it out of the park and doing something that nobody else can do. I find that difficult to believe. I've seen what some of the big farmers are doing, and it's pretty impressive, actually. So you know, there's got to be something remarkable. I mean, really remarkable, for that to be an acquirable entity. And I do think that the attractiveness of these AI-based opportunities has more to do with the nature of the investors. You know, like Andreessen Horowitz, they're tech guys. This looks more like a tech investment than a biotech investment. Personally, yeah. I don't think it looks like a great investment, but you know, time will tell whether I'm right or not. Yeah. On the value-based pricing, I think it's, you know, it's already with us. There's, you know, they're not all the same. The payers are not all the same, but they are all in competition with one another. So I think that the value-based pricing is an element, but you know, when I look at this, and it's difficult not to become cynical, but it looks like it's more about the rebate than anything else. So they don't care what your sticker price is; they're worried about the rebate. That's what.
And Kev, as data, you know, you talk about investors on the block. Really, as the big value data people had a bit of a skew into the life science. Has it changed the way that the life science? You know, you've got those blokes who are traditional drug hunter types, and then you've got tech types. I mean, we meet, we in our coffee and our agile groups, we get all sorts of people turning up under the banner of life sciences now. Has that changed?
To a degree, yes. I mean, we see a lot coming through from tech, and actually, because we were part of, you know, so Index Ventures is now a tech-only firm. I mean, they just do. They are one of the big tech VCs, and we were the life science practice within Index Ventures. So you know, we know a lot of tech guys, and I keep getting, you know, these tech guys send me stuff all the time. Say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Mostly, it's crap. I mean, it really is. I mean, that you would be hard pressed to see how that was a value proposition. Even though, you know, it's an active deal within their portfolio. Yeah. And I think they simply don't yet get, they will at some point, but they don't yet get that this is a very different game, drug discovery from tech, and you're not going to be able to disintermediate things as easily as you can in the tech world.
Yeah. Moving on to other.
Yes, we've got a couple more people here. We got Kat Arnie would like to ask a question. I'll unmute you. Bear with me. There you go.
Thank you. Hello. Hi. I'm Arnie from First Create the Media. We're a comms consultancy. So I was interested. This may not be relevant to the kind of companies that you have within Medici because they seem to be very focused. But I'm seeing there are companies, maybe a bit larger ones, and particularly in the health tech space, that are suddenly pivoting to do all COVID all the time, or trying to launch, you know, things like products, diagnostics, that kind of thing. What would be your advice to them? Would it be like, do it, avoid it like the plague, or it kind of depends? I'm thinking maybe there'll be a sort of a strategic whiplash coming down the road when they suddenly get to the end of this and like, oh, we did that, now what? Yeah,
you mean you know, trying to enter the COVID fray.
Yeah, so vaccinations or therapeutics or diagnostics suddenly pivoting. I mean, companies with relevant technology or biology.
I would have said don't even try. I mean, if you're only thinking about it now, you're too late. There are. I mean, one of our partners, Moncef Slaoui, who's to be chairman of GSK Vaccines, and he's even got a new after him in the vaccine space, and he's also on the Moderna board, and they've got the first. I think they had the first vaccine into the clinic, actually, nucleic acid based. There are dozens of these things coming down the pike. I mean, dozens. So you know that. If you're not already in the game, you're already too late for the game. I mean, I honestly don't think we'll be worrying about this next year. Genuinely don't. All of the defenses will have been put in place over the next 12 months. and I think we will have a vaccine. The issue is not will we have something that works. It's will we be able to manufacture it at sufficient scale. So it's actually a scale-up problem in the vaccine world rather than a discovery problem, I think. On the diagnostic side of things, again, it's not making the test that's the issue. I mean, there are dozens of these around. It's validating the test. How do you validate this so that you can generate actionable results? That's the battleground for diagnostics. So my short answer would be that unless you're really already deeply embedded in this area, and therefore you're probably already working on it, I wouldn't do it. One of our vaccine companies is in the fray as well, with a molecular clamp, but they're one of many, and they're only doing that because of CEPI.
Yeah. Moving on, new people, questions?
Yes, new person, Dom Neal, if you're available. Dom, hi.
Welcome, Dom.
Hi, everyone. How you doing? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Who are you?
Dom Neal from Euromedica. So I'm a headhunter in the early stage space. Kevin, do you think that the asset-centric investment model that Medici specifically adopts and kind of coined in the industry, do you think that after COVID, more and more funds could potentially look to replicate what you do, keeping it a little bit more lean, a bit more virtual, more agile, therefore obviously not having to kind of scale up so large and put too much investment?
It's a good point, Dom. Hi. This is actually, it's not why we're doing it, but it is one of the consequences of doing it this way. Because in these companies, you're looking at between 80 and 90% variable cost. So because you don't really have a very large burn, it gives you flexibility to weather lean time. So it doesn't become a sort of an existential threat. Cash isn't at least to the same extent, an existential threat for these things. So they tend to weather bad times better because they just don't need as much cash simply to keep the lights on.
And sorry to have a follow-on question as well. Do you think maybe some of the larger US funds, for instance, who kind of have that build and scale model, do you think that they'll probably have less returns and they'll struggle more than perhaps some of the smaller funds who focus on the leaner models and the more kind of asset-centric style?
Yeah, I think that it'll be one of those. It's an up and down thing. That there'll be some periods that suit them and their returns really well, and others that suit ours really well. I think they're hard times for big companies right now with a high cash burn. So that's definitely going to influence your returns, particularly if you have to raise cash, and particularly with challenging valuations. So that's definitely going to hit your return right there.
Interesting.
I think.
Interesting.
Okay.
Moving along.
I think Claire, do you have a question at all
Claire,
for?
hi. Welcome, Claire.
Oh, we got to turn you on.
There we go. I'm unmuted. Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me along. So, a question that I don't have an answer to, so I feel pretty bad asking it, actually. So, apologies. But shouldn't we be making diagnostics work? Because I'm just thinking back over my various places where I've worked and been brokered to and raised money for diagnostic companies from small caps to big caps, and it never quite worked. And whether it was a large multi-asset investor or a small cap VCT, it was always the same comment: jam for tomorrow's stories, go away. Shouldn't we kind of be making this work in this community somehow? And I don't know how.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I got into venture because I was trying to spin out a diagnostic related play from CAT, and and literally had no success at all. I fell completely on its backside. And subsequently, in every investor I know, you're right. So there should be, and all I'll do is repeat what I've said before, that I've yet to find a capitalist model for diagnostic investments. because if you look at, I mean, diagnostics looks like a bit of a ducking and diving sort of business. You know, there's a you know, you look at not the huge diagnostic companies, but mid-size diagnostic companies. I'm not going to name any names, but there's a lot of hand to mouth in those companies. It's a challenging area because you know, it's very thinly spread. So you're trying to sell, you know, thousands of units to thousands of diverse consumers. I would like to find a business model that works, because as I said before, society would benefit if we were able to bring forward more powerful diagnostics and validate them on the fly, rather than, you know, the problem we've got with COVID at the moment, because, you know, everybody wants this serology test. The issue is, how do we validate it? You know, the you know, actionable data. So and particularly the one with low level of false positives, because that definitely affects your actionability. So yes, I'd like there to be a healthier diagnostic sector, but I suspect it's the same thing as with antibiotics. Actually, I think you know, there is no antibiotic crisis in my view. It's a crisis of business model. Nobody's going to spend, you know, hundreds of $millions developing a new antibiotic that's going to be priced at 10% premium over a generic. It's just not going to happen. And I think the problem with diagnostics as well is they're too cheap, and people expect them to be cheap. So you know, it's only when there is a crisis like this that you know, they suddenly come to the fore again. But it's validation. It's not creation.
Yeah. Graham, how are we doing for time? And
well, we're pushing time a little bit. Well, we've got one more question from Viren. Viren, would you like to just add a question? I'll just unmute you.
Hi, Viren. Where are you?
Hi, I'm here, right here. Hi, Kevin. Nice to talk to you. Thanks for all the insights. Sorry, I dropped off in the middle because my Wi-Fi connection was bad. But anyway, my question is about the funding environment.
Can you just tell us who you are and where you are?
Oh yeah, sure. So Kevin and everybody, my name is Viren Mahurkar. I am the founder and chairman of an advisory boutique called Hitch and Rock Advisors. We specialize in M&A, business development, licensing, consulting for the biomedical world. So it's across biotech, medical devices, life sciences, etc. So I'm based in London. So my question is about the fundraising environment, as you're seeing it from your perspective. I see that very recently a couple of IPOs in the US have gone through quite smoothly. And in fact, a couple of them, I think they both got upsized as well. I see a lot of venture funds actually closing larger rounds and amazingly big sizes of fundraisers. I see Blackstone, even sort of non-traditional players like the private equity funds now coming into the VC space, making investments in biotech. So both for the funds and for biotech companies, how are you looking at the fundraising environment, especially after the pandemic, or as we hopefully get through the pandemic sooner or later?
I mean, I'd say that it's still a good environment. There is no reason why the biotech fundraising environment should catch a cold within this current crisis. No reason at all. It's just fear, perception, fear, that's making people a little bit more cautious than they would otherwise be. But I can tell you that there are several. You're completely right. There are several financings that have gone on, and even up rounds. And I would say the same thing. If you ask me, if we see a great opportunity, and we're looking at things all the time. If we see a great opportunity, we're going to chase it. Just as though, I mean, irrespective of the situation we're in now. The only challenge is that we have to do everything over Zoom. It's not that we don't want to make investments or we're feeling frightened or anything, because we're not. We basically, it's only our ability to act as investors. The things that we normally take for granted that we can't take for granted anymore. That's the only real impediment.
Yeah. Graham, I think we're just about.
I think we're.
Coffee's getting cold. Can I just ask? I don't know whether Vikas is there. We're always interested in Vikas, who's in India.
I know, Kevin, you might have to go off as well. So, thank you very much. But it'd be great,
Before Kev goes, Kev, you're a star.
Thank you.
Donor is available for you afterwards. And let's all thank Kev for a great.
Thank you very much. That's a fun.
Please come again, and we'll see you soon.
But it would be lovely to hear from. Yeah. Lovely to hear from Vikas if he's on the line.
Vikas, what is it? Are you in India?
There he is.
What's the latest in India? Just tell us.
Okay. Oh. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
How is it there?
I think there is no change whatsoever. The lockdown has got extended. The lockdown for 21 days, which was supposed to get over today, has got extended by another 19 days. So we are under lockdown till the 3rd of May. There is panic, but I think the government is just trying to ensure that people stay indoors and so that we can contain this virus spread. I mean, if you look at the numbers, they have gone past, the positive cases have gone past 10,000. The number of deaths are increasing. And at the same time, we are at a stage where it has entered the community, but because of the lockdown, I think it is not multiplying, it is adding at the moment. So I think another 1 week would be a little critical for us to see what happens here. And then I think we would be in a better position to understand, how this lockdown has been effective or not.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Vikas. I think it's time we close. From me, it's been fantastic. We've got Max Herman going to talk to us on Thursday. Max is a smart guy, lovely guy, who's a biotech analyst, and he'll be telling us what impacts we're having on the market. And be careful out there, and bye for now. Thanks again.
Yeah.
Bye then.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye for now.